How many Mr. Pickles will it get? Let's see if this cabinet has what it takes.
Video Game Vegas.
He's so cute.
Friends, Video Game Vegas, and this is my review of Arcade1Up's Pac-Man Neon Deluxe Arcade Cabinet. I base my arcade cabinet reviews on 10 categories, which you'll find detailed in the text below. For each positive in a category, or more positive than negative in a category, I'll score it a Mr. Pickle. The more Mr. Pickles it gets, of course, the better. Based upon the total score and my overall thoughts, I'll recommend if you should get it, vet it, or in other words, put it through its paces in person before you buy, or forget it. A couple of disclaimers before I get into my review. All my product reviews are based solely upon the item or items I receive. Some may get the same product and have no issues. Some may have more issues than I did. And maybe I get no issues at all, my hope for any product. Or maybe a majority of the specific product performs or presents differently than the one I got. But when it comes down to it, what I get is what I review. I don't acquiesce to excuses like, I must have gotten a bad one or a good one, or ruminate shipping issues if I had it shipped, though I may note something. But plainly put, I'm an advocate for good quality with a strong emphasis towards quality control. And if a company wants their product seen favorably, then they need to make this a paramount part of their philosophy and put it to action. So what every customer receives is an acceptable, if not preferred, exceptional experience every time. Some may think it unfair not to put a more significant emphasis on the law of averages, and I appreciate that opinion. But my reviews are meant to tell my experience on exactly what I got, good or bad. Second, the footage presented in my videos of arcade cabinets I review or showcase may contain updated parts, decorations, software, or other bits and bobs not included in a standard purchase. Please make sure to check advertised listings or reach out to retailers or companies to confirm complete contents in box. Now let's get to it. Space, the final frontier. Not just a great opening line to the classic sci-fi series Star Trek any longer, but taking on a whole new meaning for me when the hobby of building actual arcades at home became available to more people through the advent of 3/4 scale, consumer grade, and friendly priced arcade machines. When a company called Arcade1Up came onto the scene, it awakened something in a lot of us. In fact, the thought of having an actual arcade at home with several cabinets wasn't even something I toyed with before them, because I didn't want to have large and heavy commercial arcade machines in my house. Arcade1Up sparked the idea with their reimagined take, the inkling to have something beyond just one single generic multicade that played a lot of games, having to get creative at times with limited or hacked controls to make certain games somewhat playable, to now having a full-on physical arcade experience, replete with multiple machines, each with their own dedicated controls, or mostly dedicated controls, filling the air all at the same time with that familiar cavalcade of lights and sounds, licensed to look and play like the ones we remembered from commercial arcades, and small enough to fit several in most any average-sized room. The floodgates rushed open, as cabinets we could only dream of before became available in these smaller and lighter form factors. Rooms filled up, and for some folks, multiple rooms, as we continued to ask for every game under the sun. It seemed like a never-ending party with endless possibilities, and for me it still is. But many of us soon found out space would indeed become the final frontier, as no matter how compact these new machines were, they still took up room. When I began my home arcade journey, I strictly planned to limit myself to just one room as a dedicated arcade. This would force me to get creative, something I love to do, in order to bring my vision to life. Being older and wiser and knowing when I get excited about something I tend to go overboard, I didn't want to repeat the mistakes I made with other hobbies in the past. Plus, I personally didn't want to end up with a whole house full of arcade machines. Not that there's anything wrong with that. And if someone set out to do it, I'd be excited to see how it turned out. But that's just not my vision. Setting this clear boundary from the start allowed me to avoid buying everything that came out, meticulously deciding beforehand which titles I wanted to see in my home arcade, waiting for them to come out, and if they didn't, trying to make them happen in other ways. Some 7 years later, I have no regrets, and am still having the time of my life. Now, I did end up creating a smaller and separate arcade nook in one of my home theaters, and the footage you're watching right now is taken from that nook. But it too had to adhere to a planned and pre-allotted area. I never expected perfection pursuing this hobby, only overall happiness, which I feel I've achieved. In my dedicated home arcade right now, I have 14 machines with full-size controls. 13 of them are 3/4 scale cabinets, and one is a wall-mounted unit called a Partycade. Throughout my room configuration changes, measuring is a necessary key, precision a paramount, to make sure every machine can be played comfortably. I wanted to have the ability to play either standing up or sitting on a stool for the majority of machines, which I initially succeeded. My first conceived endgame room layout, after I decided to convert the original space from a bedroom/arcade with a couple cabinets in it to a full dedicated arcade with just games, was to have a total of 12 machines with full-size controls along the walls. After I achieved this goal, I felt there was something missing, a noticeable emptiness in the middle of the room. I first thought, maybe a cocktail-style cabinet could fill the void. Arcade1Up had a few on offer called head-to-heads, and though smaller than their commercial counterparts, I discovered they would be too long from player side to player side, making some of the machines along the wall feel too cramped. Arcade1Up also had a taller pub table design, which I loved the look and height of, but unfortunately, they were also too large. I did end up finding one style of cocktail cabinet that could fit comfortably in that space, an unlicensed and barrel-shaped one, but the asking prices for those were way too expensive. Eventually, and thankfully, I realized a traditional stand-up 3/4 scale cabinet, just like the ones I had along the wall, would fit perfectly there without impacting the other machines. I settled on Arcade1Up's Atari Legacy Tempest, an absolutely gorgeous cab that made an excellent centerpiece. After being able to fit a cabinet in the center of the room, I started to wonder if I could get just one more machine in there. There was one last space along the wall just behind the door, but because I still needed to get into the room, a 3/4 scale size was out of the question. But Arcade1Up had an ultra-thin form factor called a Partycade that would mount directly to the wall. And once I found the perfect one for me, voila, machine number 14 was achieved. This final room layout worked for years, and if I ever wanted to swap out a cab with something I liked better, it would be an easy exchange, or so I thought. Little did I realize it wouldn't be the case when I decided to pick up Arcade1Up's Time Crisis cabinet, a third attempt to add light gun games to my setup. I've always wanted a light gun cabinet in my home arcade. My first attempt was a dedicated one from Arcade1Up called Big Buck World, but Big Buck World's cabinet artwork never quite meshed with the vision I had for the VideoGameVegas Arcade. I was hoping Arcade1Up would come out with a cabinet that I remembered fondly from my past, with my biggest hope, a House of the Dead. But as time went on, it became increasingly clear that that one wasn't going to happen. Now, Arcade1Up did have another light gun cabinet, a Terminator 2, and though I really liked that game, I've never been a fan of its cabinet art. For my home arcade, the way a cabinet looks is just as important as the games on it. Otherwise, why not just stick with generic multicades? For a short time, Another 3/4 scale company called iArcade looked to offer a perfect solution for light gun games with their Gold Edition cabinet line. But unfortunately, they went out of business before they could realize its full potential. It only sported 2 titles, and I wanted more. I waited to see if any 3/4 scale company would come out with a light gun cabinet I wanted, and it finally happened with Arcade1Up's Time Crisis. Though it wasn't House of the Dead, nor a title I recall seeing in a commercial arcade, though I did frequently play a version of the game on a PlayStation console in a store I'd shop at called Software Etc., Arcade1Up's cabinet was just plain gorgeous and sold me on its looks alone. The price, however, initially left me cold. Now my plan was to use Arcade1Up's Time Crisis as a shell to mod and add more games, which I did, because the paltry 4 games it came with was not going to cut it. So when the cabinet came down in price, low enough for me at the time, I picked it up. But as meticulous as I had been before at measuring cabinets and space in my home arcade, I didn't look closely enough at the new machine's dimensions and assumed there would be little to no size difference in depth between cabinets in Arcade1Up's same 3/4 scale size category. As far as the main body of Time Crisis and the main body of the cabinet it was swapping with, Arcade1Up's Marvel Superheroes, the depth was almost the same. But what I didn't account for was the extra real estate the Time Crisis protruding control panel had. It added an additional 6 inches of depth that wasn't present on Marvel Superheroes. And though that may not sound like much, my margin of error for space was so thin that it was enough to create tight squeeze areas in the room, causing less than desirable access to some of the machines. Now I could still navigate everywhere in my arcade, but a notable level of comfort was gone. I felt like I needed to either remove the cabinet I placed in the middle of the room, Tempest, bringing back that empty feeling I felt before, or remove Time Crisis entirely and return Marvel Superheroes. The situation stunk. But Arcade1Up would soon introduce a new 3/4 scale design with a thinner profile. A slimmer single-body deluxe cabinet some in the community dubbed the Slim Katie. My first impressions of the new line were less than favorable. I felt Arcade1Up did this solely as a cost-cutting measure to use less materials and still charge the same price as their original designs. The first cabinet in this line was a Wheel of Fortune. It wasn't your traditional arcade game, more of a faux slot machine with some additional tablet games included. It also had a step at the bottom of it, presumably to put your foot on so the cabinet wouldn't tip over while you played. This ridiculous decision showed me that Arcade1Up went a step too far, pun intended, when slimming down their cabinets. Their next entry in the line was a 2-player version of their NBA Jam, also coming with that same silly step at the bottom. I've often clamored for Arcade1Up to make 2-player versions of their 4-player machines, but this wasn't what I had in mind. Like the Wheel of Fortune, the main body looked way too skinny to me. Thankfully, Arcade1Up looked like they figured out the right formula with the next entry in this line, a version of their Pac-Man Plus, ditching the step at the bottom and instead filling out the entire depth of the body. And though I'm not a fan of Pac-Man Plus the game, I've always been fond of its marquee art, and the wood grain on the cabinet body gave me all sorts of great feels. But for some reason, the light bulb didn't go off at the time, as this being a potential remedy to my space problem. It wasn't until Arcade1Up came out with their Pac-Man Neon Deluxe Edition that the wheels really began to turn. Arcade1Up's Pac-Man Neon Deluxe is a recreation of a newer commercial Namco arcade machine called the Pac-Man Pixel Bash Neon Cabaret. This account does get into speculation territory, as my many searches for information on this cabinet, nowhere was I able to find a definitive statement from Arcade1Up stating this case. But if you look at the cabinets side by side, the artwork is identical in enough places, and I've never seen another commercial cabinet with that same artwork, except for Namco's other commercial variations of it. It should also be noted that both cabinets have the specific word neon as identifiers in their titles. A lot of us in this space know that Arcade1Up also likes to take liberties with their final designs. The cabinet shape of Arcade1Up's neon does not match Namco's commercial Pixel Bash, but Arcade1Up will at times do their own thing when it comes to the shape of a cabinet, known mostly for this practice when they started the company with their inaugural shark fin design. But even to this day, Arcade1Up continues to do this. What Arcade1Up came up with for Pac-Man Neon Deluxe is fantastic, and I actually prefer it over Namco's Pixel Bash shape. Now I can absolutely entertain the argument that Arcade1Up is just using the Neon Pixel Bash artwork to reskin one of their older machines, namely their slim Pac-Man Plus Deluxe. But if this is the case, and it wouldn't be a total surprise given Arcade1Up's propensity to cut corners, I think it would be pretty scummy, given that 2025 is the 45th anniversary of this iconic video game character. For this review, I'm going to treat Arcade1Up's Pac-Man Neon Deluxe as a recreation of Namco's commercial Pac-Man Pixel Bash Neon Cabaret and frame it herein. But please keep in mind, these are my additional speculative thoughts. Arcade1Up's Pac-Man Neon Deluxe is an absolute stunner. And because I was so taken by the art reformation applied to Arcade1Up's cabinet, I immediately started looking up the measurements for this deluxe. I found it would give me back around 4 inches of additional space in depth and around an inch or two at the sides. Not quite as much room as I had before Time Crisis, but pretty darn close. I already had an arcade machine based upon the titular title Pac-Man in my dedicated arcade, Arcade1Up's Namco Legacy Edition, and didn't see the need to have 2 cabinets representing that game in the same room. I decided to move my yellow Pac-Man out of my dedicated arcade and into my home theater's arcade nook, and then shift Tempest to where the yellow Pac was, leaving the space in the center of the dedicated arcade for the new slimmer Pac-Man Neon. I was able to pick up Arcade1Up's Pac-Man Neon Deluxe for $4.99 with free shipping. I thought the price was a bit steep for what the cabinet offers, especially compared to what I paid for my Namco Pac-Man Legacy Edition on sale at $1.99. But bringing comfort back into my home arcade was incredibly important to me, so I felt it was worth the risk. Before we jump headlong into the Pac-Man Neon review, I wanted to mention that I'll also be reviewing 2 other Arcade1Up cabinets in this video. These are from Arcade1Up's original Deluxe Pac-Man line, a Galaga Deluxe and a Ms. Pac-Man Deluxe, a black variation. Both of these are also known as Vault Editions, which I'll use the word Vault from here on out to describe them for sake of brevity. I was fortunate a while back to find both Galaga Vault and Ms. Pac-Man Vault playable in stores, getting sufficient hands-on time with them. I wish I could have also tracked down a Pac-Man Plus Deluxe as well, but it looks like it finally sold out as a Costco exclusive. One thing to note about Galaga Vault and Ms. Pac-Man Vault: they are pretty much reskins of cabinet designs shared by 2023's Pac-Man Deluxe and Class of '81 Deluxe. I also share pretty much the same sentiments for the Vault Editions as I do for those 2 Deluxes, and those sentiments can be found in my video review of the Arcade1Up Namco Pac-Man Legacy Edition. Because of this, my commentary on the Vault Editions will be a bit shorter in this video, and I'll leave a link to that review in the description below if you're interested in a deeper dive. Now without further ado, let's get to it. The look of the cabinet. The advertised pictures for the Pac-Man Neon Deluxe do not do it justice. And though I feel my video footage turned out great, this is a cabinet that begs to be seen in person. It's a true celebration of Pac-Man. And I'm also happy to report, not a ding or scratch on it out of the box. This is also one of Arcade1Up's most beautiful cabinet designs, very reminiscent of cabaret-style machines I remember playing in commercial arcades back in the day. Cabarets are smaller than typical full-size arcade machines, but just as much fun. And Arcade1Up's take here lends even better, due to the neon's slimmer cabinet design. As for the Vault Editions of Galaga and Ms. Pac-Man, their cabinet shapes more closely represent their commercial arcade counterparts, and they also look amazing. The neon motif of Pac-Man Neon Deluxe fits perfectly with the main theme of my home arcade, Las Vegas. Las Vegas has been called the City of Neon, and this cabinet has it all over. Well, except at the bottom of the front kick plate, where it displays a different kind of art styling, featuring 3 of the ghosts from Pac-Man. And before some look to correct me for calling the enemies in Pac-Man ghosts, I know they're called monsters in the original game. I think enough people have spoken over time that they're also known as ghosts to many of us. I think calling them ghosts or monsters is apropos. I feel it prudent to also speak a bit more about the fact there are only 3 of 4 ghosts on that artwork, with Pinky most notably absent. Given Arcade1Up's history of removing or changing certain games that appear on their machines for licensing reasons or whatnot, like remove players from NBA Jam and NFL Blitz, and music changes in games like Frogger and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, something like this could cause concern. Even recently, with newcomer to the 3/4 scale market, a company called Basic Fun released their WWE WrestleFest, with key wrestlers missing from some of the arcade ROMs on that machine. Let me ease any fears that might be out there regarding Pac-Man Neon Deluxe. Pinky is indeed in the game, and is just as rambunctious as you remember. One other thing I've heard questioned about the kickplate art is why would Namco or Arcade1Up choose a different style that deviates from the rest of the cabinet's neon aesthetic? It felt random to some, done without much thought to others, but I think more went into the second visual choice beyond a first glance. I think inspiration was taken from another officially licensed Namco product, a Pac-Man stress ball, which you can see here on the screen. And if this is the case, I think it's kinda genius. What better way to de-stress from a hard day at work than with a good round of Pac-Man, or a Blinky stress ball? I know I might be giving Arcade1Up and Namco too much credit here, but regardless of why they chose to go this way, Namco design or not, I really dig it, and I feel it adds more character to the cabinet. But it all comes down to taste in the end, and only you can decide if it appeals to you. As for the Galaga Vault and Ms. Pac-Man Vault, their artwork is superb as well. The art on the Galaga Vault looks very reminiscent to its commercial arcade counterpart. The Ms. Pac-Man Vault, however, follows a different suit. For fans of the classic Ms. Pac-Man cabinet in blue, might be disappointed with the pink on black design. But I gotta tell ya, after owning a Ms. Pac-Man Partycade with the same black and pink color scheme, it grew on me. Now, would I choose the classic blue over the black design? Every day of the week, but I wouldn't kick either out of bed. Continuing with individual tastes, I don't care for faux coin doors. I don't hate them, but all the arcade machines in my home arcade are set to free play, so fake coin doors seem silly to me, unless they serve a function where you can press them to add credits. The coin doors on the Pac-Man Neon and the ones that come on the Vault Editions do nothing. And I get that some like the look of faux coin doors, maybe to remind them of commercial machines, but I've never understood the visual appeal. In fact, I don't ever recall going to a commercial arcade and thinking to myself, gee, those coin doors look purty. Coin doors to me are just places to deposit money, or to get lucky and find a stray token once in a while. I don't ever recall finding myself looking intently at them, even when inserting a quarter, which I usually do by touch alone. But you know what I do find visually pleasing? Amazing artwork of game logos. I'd love to see Arcade1Up default back to placing these on the kick plate like they did in the beginning and still a bit today. And game logos also serve a functional purpose, showing what you can play on a machine as you walk up to it. But here's the real kicker. The commercial cabinet that Arcade1Up's Pac-Man Neon is recreating has actual game logos on the front of it. So it really doesn't make sense why Arcade1Up didn't include them on their Neon Deluxe. Now it might have to do with the games that appear on Arcade1Up's machine versus Namco's Pixel Bash, which we'll get into in the games and gameplay section of the review, but I think it's a real shame. Pac-Man Neon also comes with a light-up marquee, and it's one of the best Arcade1Up have ever crafted. Absolutely no light bleed or fade, just pure brilliance. Now I did have a slight mishap before installing it. I dropped it onto a hard floor, and some of the print chipped on one of the sides. It's minuscule and barely noticeable, but I touched it up with a black paint pen and all is well. If you do get this machine, please be aware of just how fragile the art on the marquee is. The Galaga Vault and Ms. Pac-Man Vault also come with light-up marquees and receive the same A+ treatment as the Neon. Inky blacks, light in all the right places, all the colors pop. Bravo, Arcade1Up. Cabinet structure and assembly. Like Arcade1Up's original Pac-Man Deluxe and Class of '81 Deluxe, as well as the Vault editions of Galaga and Ms. Pac-Man, the Pac-Man Neon Deluxe feels like you could tip it over with little effort if you were trying to tip it over. But a test like that really doesn't tell the whole story. What matters is if a cabinet feels sturdy enough to play as intended without feeling like it's going to tip over. I'm happy to say that all these Deluxes/Vaults feel sturdy enough for that. But if you are someone who feels you're particularly rough on machines, or if you have kids and aren't going to mount this against the wall with a tip-over strap, then you might be better served going with Arcade1Up's Namco Pac-Man Legacy Edition with its riser. You could also go with the much bigger Pac-Man XL as well, since that one is also very sturdy. But the XL unfortunately does have some display issues, which we'll touch upon in the picture quality section of this review. I wish Arcade1Up would consider riser edition options for all their one-piece designs, not only because risers can make these smaller cabinets sturdier due to a wider base, non-inline risers of course, but also make them easier to move and situate due to a two-piece design. However, when it comes to the main reason I purchased the Pac-Man Neon Deluxe, to free up as much space as possible, a two-piece setup with a shorter cabinet and wider riser might have added too much to the cabinet's dimensions, defeating some of that purpose. And now the moment I often dread: cabinet assembly. Like most Arcade1Ups, putting them together is a pain in the ass. I decided this time I was going to build the cabinet myself. Normally my brother helps me out, but I wanted to see if there were any improvements of the process. Unfortunately, it was worse. It took me just north of 5 hours to get everything together, the longest of any Arcade1Up I built. And because the instructions were not clear to me in places, I ended up with the bottom of the cabinet on backwards. I take responsibility, but still. The cabinet is structurally fine, but the cool LED light box it comes with, which is supposed to shine out of the bottom front of the cabinet, now shines out the back. I plan to fix it at some point, but for now, it's not that big of a deal. Now, of course I didn't build the Galaga and Ms. Pac-Man Vault Editions, but I guarantee you, it's not going to be a party. Putting together most Arcade1Ups suck. But unlike the Vault Editions, and the previous Pac-Man and Class of '81 Deluxes, along with the Pac-Man XL, Arcade1Up did remedy the way you remove the control panel on the Pac-Man Neon Deluxe. The Neon goes back to the traditional way, a simple removal of 2 screws to detach the control panel if you ever need to fix anything. The other aforementioned cabinets You practically have to take them apart to remove their control panels. Thank you, Arcade1Up, for going back to the old method for the Neon. Physical controls. The controls for the Pac-Man Neon Deluxe, along with the Galaga Ms. Pac-Man Vault Editions, won't win any awards for the best of the best in quality, but they are good enough, and I have fun playing on them. The button types are different between the Vaults and the Neon, with the Neon coming with more standard style buttons versus the ones on the Galaga Ms. Pac-Man Vaults, which can light up, controlled by an on and off switch. The buttons also feel a little different to the touch between the Neon and the Vaults, but all of them perform the same. It should also be noted that the control panel on the Neon is quite shorter in depth than your typical non-slim 3/4 scale cabinet. It more reminds me of a partycade, but like a partycade, it has plenty of room to play comfortably on. The only thing I was worried about with the Neon's control panel is that it didn't come with a protective plexiglass overlay like you'd find on the Vaults and on most Arcade1Up 3/4 scale cabinets. I'm happy to report the material they use on the Neon's control panel feels sturdy and may even be vinyl. It has a couple of Pac-Man shaped raised areas next to the Player 1 and Player 2 buttons, which confirms to me that this isn't a cheap art print on glossy wood. Time will tell if anything fades, but it doesn't feel like it would. It feels premium. Overall, Mr. Pickles all around for the physical controls on all of these machines. Picture quality. This was the main thing I was worried about when I considered picking up the Pac-Man Neon Deluxe. It comes with a monitor under the brand BOE, which a lot of people in the community love, including myself. But when Arcade1Up experimented with that monitor, slanting it to an almost horizontal angle on their Pac-Man XL, Pac-Man Deluxe, and Class of 81 Deluxe, to make the cabinet shaped more like their commercial counterparts, the display results were disastrous when compared to their previous Namco Pac-Man Legacy Edition. Arcade1Up proved that even BOE monitors, at least the models they chose, have their limits. The Pac-Man Neon also comes with a slant to its monitor, but not extreme like the aforementioned Deluxes and XL. Any kind of slant had me concerned, but I'm happy to report everything displays fantastic on the Neon. Vibrant colors, great contrast and black levels, and a uniform picture consistency. It's a looker for sure. But is it as good as the Pac-Man Legacy? Pretty much. Although I can detect an ever so slight bit of fading at certain angles over the Legacy. But it's so slight that it's hardly worth making a deal of. Pivoting to the Galaga Ms. Pac-Man Vault Editions, they have that same extreme monitor slant as the Pac-Man and Class of 81 Deluxes and Pac-Man XL. And just like them, the screens are pushed way beyond their optimal display capabilities. There is a moving washout effect that occurs as you move around, away from, or towards the cabinet. And unless you're playing dead on center without moving your head side to side, you're going to notice it constantly. I've dealt with the one bad screen in the arcade effect before, and it can ruin the whole vibe of a room. But if you only plan to have just one machine, then either Galaga or Ms. Pac-Man Vault might be tolerable. But if you plan to add more cabinets that display well, or already have existing cabinets that display well, then these Vault Editions will stick out like a sore thumb. The only positive thing I can say about the displays in the Galaga and Ms. Pac-Man Vaults is they could have been a whole lot worse. Arcade1Up have used actual substandard monitors in some of their machines, ones that naturally projected even worse washout, and some with additional discoloration issues no matter what position they were put in. But even saying that, I wouldn't personally put up with the one bad screen in the room situation again, especially when there are better Namco Arcade1Ups out there, like the Neon and the Legacy. And now that I've seen this horrible display effect in person in a total of 5 cabinets with an extreme monitor slant now, I'm going to call out some bullshit when it comes to the many reviews I've seen on them. I've tried to give the benefit of the doubt to some, but now seeing every single cabinet in this shape with my own eyes, all displaying that very same screen irregularity, those not being forthright about it are suspect, unless one simply doesn't care about a cabinet's picture quality, and then that should be made unequivocally clear in the review. I've watched so many videos where the issue can clearly be seen in the footage, only to hear it downplayed, dismissed, or omitted, or even claiming it to be a perfect picture. Those I confronted, some of them blamed it on camera or lighting issues, and I would have believed those I established a level of trust with over time. But after physically seeing the cabinets in person, at best, this is a huge disservice to anyone watching their videos, and at worst, a slap in the face to anyone who bought one of these cabinets based on their reviews. Now, those who have been watching my arcade cabinet reviews know these are not places to stir up drama, so you won't find me calling out names of specific content creators. Those who I'm talking about already know. I believe in confronting people directly, one-on-one, and hashing it out that way. This way, I could share my general feelings in a video without airing dirty laundry, especially with an important issue like this. I want to caution, if you see any content creator not pointing out display problems on the Galaga or Ms. Pac-Man Vault Editions, or in the Pac-Man and Class of 81 Deluxes, or with the Pac-Man XL, I would highly scrutinize any arcade cabinet review they've ever done. A lot of us in the home arcade community rely on reviews we can trust, and I'm angry at those who seek to mislead, whether provided a cabinet for free or not. And I want to make this crystal clear. I am not suggesting malicious intent. I'm just glad I questioned footage that didn't match what a person was saying and sought out the cabinets myself. One last thing before I move on to the next category. If you are someone who likes the way the monitors look in the Vault Editions, Pac-Man or Class of 81 Deluxes, or Pac-Man XL, that's great. We're all entitled to our own likes and dislikes, and I hope you continue to enjoy those machines. Sound. The Pac-Man Neon, along with the Galaga and Ms. Pac-Man Vaults, have amazing sounds. However, even though each has 15 levels of volume, anything over 3 or 4 is way too loud. I'm not sure why Arcade1Up decided not to keep the more gradual volume changes found in the Namco Pac-Man Legacy Edition, but because there are at least a few levels serviceable for my purposes, all machines get a pass here. Games and gameplay. The Pac-Man Neon Deluxe comes with 14 games, which include Pac-Man, Pac-Mania, Pac-Man Plus, Pac-Land, Super Pac-Man, Pac-and-Pal, Galaxian, Galaga, Galaga 88, Dig Dug, Dig Dug 2, Mappy, Rompers, and Rolling Thunder. Galaga Vault comes with the exact same lineup of 14 games, but Ms. Pac-Man Vault changes up its similar 14-game lineup by replacing Pac-Man, Rolling Thunder, and Galaga 88 with Ms. Pac-Man, King and Balloon, and Dragon Buster. All games on these cabinets play great, but for what you pay for, there needs to be more. Now, I won't harp much on the vaults. They came out at a time when 14 games was an uptick from previous rosters, still woefully inadequate. But there is absolutely no excuse for not upping the number of games on this year's Neon Deluxe. Like I mentioned earlier, if this is a recreation of Namco's Pac-Man Pixel Bash Neon Cabaret, then Arcade1Up's Neon is missing 19 of its commercial counterparts' games, which include Baraduke, Bosconian, Dragon Buster, Dragon Spirit, Gapless, Grobda, Hopping Mappy, King and Balloon, Metrocross, Motos, Ms. Pac-Man, Rally X, New Rally X, Sky Kid, Sky Kid Deluxe, Splatterhouse, The Tower of Druaga, Xebius, and Super Xebius. Now, it should be noted that Arcade1Up's Pac-Man Neon Deluxe does come with one game not found on Namco's Pixel Bash, and that's Pac-Land. possibly due to the control layout on the Pixel Bash. Some might also point out that there are several 8-way joystick games on the Pixel Bash, and Arcade1Up's Neon only comes with one single 4-way restrictor joystick. But Arcade1Up could have chosen to use a different joystick solution, one that switched between 4-way and 8-way. Many options, even cheap ones, are out there. And if Arcade1Up wasn't stupid, by burning bridges with one of the greatest home arcade control gurus out there, Glenn from Glenn's Retro Show, they might have secured his amazing automatic gateway switcher technology. I've also heard some say that Arcade1Up will never put Pac-Man and Ms. Pac-Man on the same cabinet because they want to keep getting that bag by selling two different machines. I can believe that. But this is the 45th anniversary of Pac-Man, and I think it's about damn time they bring these two together, finally, on the same 3/4 scale cabinet. If Namco could do it on the Pixel Bash, then Arcade1Up needs to step up as well. Arcade1Up has shown a pretty good pattern, though very weak, of upticking the games roster on their cabinets year to year. And I think they should have at least added some, if not all, these games on the Neon Deluxe, which have already appeared on other iterations of their cabinets before. They are Dragon Buster, Hopping Mappy, King and Balloon, Rally X, New Rally X, the Tower of Galaga, and of course, Ms. Pac-Man. But if Arcade1Up really wanted to celebrate Pac-Man's 45th anniversary, instead of treating it like just another cash grab, they could have gone all out like another great 3/4 scale company did, Unico, who celebrated Neo Geo gaming with a cabinet called the MVSX that has 50 freaking games. And what's crazy is, I paid the same price for the MVSX as I did for the Pac-Man Neon Deluxe, which the Deluxe, of course, only comes with 14 games, not to mention way less controls. And 14 games wouldn't bother me on a much cheaper cabinet, or if no other games could complement the Neon's control scheme, or with some minor hardware variation. But as we know, that isn't the case, and Arcade1Up could have easily considered at least 45 games to commemorate the 45th anniversary. But I think as fans, we deserve 50 games for that $4.99 price tag. Plus, I don't know if Arcade1Up will still be around when Pac-Man turns 50. Here's how I think Arcade1Up should have crafted the Pac-Man Neon Deluxe, replete with 50 games. Arcade1Up is already saving on the reduction of materials on the new slimmer deluxes, which also carries over to reduce shipping costs due to lighter freight. With just a small portion of those huge savings, they could get a capable 4-way, 8-way joystick switcher solution to allow all games I'm about to suggest to play correctly. Almost all of these games have appeared so many times on so many cheap collections that Namco seems to give out licenses like candy. So Arcade1Up shouldn't be taking a big hit here. Again, they're pocketing extra money using less resources to create the hardware. We'll start by including the 33 titles I've already mentioned from the previous cabinets. But it's also time to stop messing around. We're going to add some of the best Namco arcade games of all time. And the crazy thing is, you may have never heard of them. Enter the arrangement titles from Namco's two commercial arcade machines, Namco Classic Collection Volume 1 and Namco Classic Collection Volume 2. Each of these cabinets contains 3 classic Namco arcade games, along with 3 new versions called arrangements. If you haven't played these yet, you're in for one hell of a treat. These arrangements are for the games Galaga, Pac-Man, Dig Dug, Mappy, Rally X, and Xevious. I was absolutely blown away when I first discovered them at a Namco Sega-themed arcade back in the day. Galaga Arrangement in itself is the best Galaga game ever made, and I don't say that lightly, because I love the entire series. And some of the arrangement games even have 2-player co-op options, like Pac-Man and Dig Dug. And I gotta tell you, there's nothing quite like taking down bosses in Dig Dug Arrangement with a buddy. And yes, You heard that right. Dig Dug Arrangement has boss battles. But the Pac-Man Neon Deluxe is a single-player cab, and Arcade1Up would need to decide how to approach the issue. They could do what they've done in the past, providing one-player versions of games that have two-player options, like they did with Space Duel on the Atari Legacy Tempest Cab. Or they could add a USB port for an optional second-player controller to be plugged in. I mostly play single-player on these games, even on the ports to consoles, so I think adding a place to connect a controller is something I could take or leave. I'm going to provide links to videos to both the Namco Classic Collection Volume 1 and 2, so you can see just how amazing these arrangement games are. Now let's grab a bunch of other great Namco arcade games to complete our collection. I'm going to go with Blazer, Cosmo Gang the Video, Dragon Saber, Orodyne, Phelios, Fozon, Rolling Thunder 2, Tank Battalion, The Return of Ishtar, and Toy Pop. I think these provide a great variety of gameplay styles, so the cabinet appeals to more people. But if you're keeping count, that only makes 49 games. I've saved a somewhat controversial one for last. Arcade1Up has in the past put games from different publishers on the same cabinet. I think this particular game is not only the most logical choice, but is also the best choice for this cabinet. Let us welcome Bally Midway's Junior Pac-Man. Many of us have been clamoring for this gem for years, and I feel it's time to bring the whole Pac family together. This game is so much fun and puts a cherry on top of a truly epic collection. Arcade1Up, or any 3/4 scale company. Your move. Customer support. Anytime I don't have to contact customer support, a Mr. Pickle is achieved. Good job, Arcade1Up. Other annoyances beyond what I've already discussed? Only one, but not the end of the world. I don't understand why Arcade1Up decided to replace the simple on-off position power switch on the Pac-Man Neon Deluxe. I have all my machines in my home arcade connected to smart plugs, so I could turn them all on and off at the same time by keeping them switched to the on position. The Neon, as well as my Tron, don't have that ability. They come equipped with some crappy slide on-off button, which makes it so you have to physically move the switch on the machine every time you want to turn it on, defeating the purpose of the smart plug. I have so many things I have to manually operate in my home arcade, and these extra steps add up. Is the cabinet fun? The Pac-Man Neon Deluxe and the Galaga Ms. Pac-Man Vault Editions are so much fun. If you like these games, then these cabinets will provide a good time. Value for price. The Pac-Man Neon Deluxe, along with the Galaga Ms. Pac-Man Vaults, are nowhere near worth their $4.99 asking price. At $1.99, the Pac-Man Neon is a no-brainer. But we're living in crazy times at the making of this video, and world events are raising prices of pretty much everything. If I take that into account, I'd say the Pac-Man Neon Deluxe is worth it at $2.99 with free shipping. The Vaults, on the other hand, with their display issues, well, let's just see where the Pickles fall, shall we? So, adding up the tally of all the categories, how many Mr. Pickles does Arcade1Up's Pac-Man Neon Deluxe get? 7 Mr. Pickles out of 10. Get it. At $2.99, of course. And I'm happy to report that the Neon solved my home arcade's space issue. Comfort has returned to the VideoGameVegas Arcade. And I would have liked to show you what it looks like in there in this video, but I'm currently going through a huge renovation in that room and didn't want to film all the disarray. I'm hoping to do an updated home arcade tour sometime next year, showing what the cabinet looks like in there, as well as all the new amazing sights and sounds of the room. Keep a lookout for it. Now let's get to the vaults. So, adding up the tally of all the categories, how many Mr. Pickles do Galaga and Ms. Pac-Man Vault Editions get? 6 Mr. Pickles out of 10. Vet it. You really need to see the display issues in person before buying either of these cabinets. Same goes for the Pac-Man Deluxe, Class of 81 Deluxe, and Pac-Man XL. There are just way better Arcade1Up Namco options out there, and the Neon is now one of them. I think the advice I give to those writing off slimmer cabinets as bad, due to a preconceived notion that anything slimmer must be bad, is to experience one in person. There are a lot of voices out there trying to convince people that there is only one way to see things. Keeping an open mind can surprise you sometimes. And if I were to listen to the dissenting voices regarding Arcade1Up's new slimmed down cabinet line, especially from those who've never seen or played on one before, my home arcade might still be cramped today. Space will always be the final frontier when it comes to my home arcade. And I'm glad when companies consider this notion, either by reducing physical footprint or by expanding the number of games in a cabinet, when it makes sense, of course. I'm so excited to see what's next for our hobby, and so thankful for the inventions that have allowed so many of us to build the arcades of our dreams. Safe travels, everyone, and remember, you always have a right to your opinion, but only I have a right to mine. Until next time, stay wiggly, my friends.